In our last talk, we explored the nature of the self, how the mind gradually constructs an identity, and how that identity begins to shape the way we experience life. This talk turns towards that place where the illusion becomes most painful, suffering. Because suffering is not one experience, it is two. One belongs to life itself, the other belongs to the stories the mind tells about life. Learning to recognize the difference changes everything. Let's begin. We all suffer. That is part of being human. But very few of us stop to ask what exactly we are suffering from. When we don't understand the nature of suffering, we begin fighting shadows. We argue with memories. We fear futures that haven't arrived. We carry burdens that exist only inside the mind. Much of the turmoil we experience doesn't come from what is happening. It is coming from what the mind is doing with what is happening. That distinction is one of the most important discoveries I've made. Suffering has two components. One is real, the other is imagined. The imagined component is uniquely human. It is our extraordinary ability to create stories, to revisit the past, to project ourselves into the future, to imagine conversations, arguments, losses, failures, long before they ever exist. The remarkable thing is that the body often responds as though those imagined events are already real. The real component of suffering is different. It belongs to the body, to illness, to injury, to loss, to the vulnerability that comes with being alive. Every living creature experiences this. Pain belongs to life, but the suffering created by interpretation belongs to the human mind. Both feel real, but they do not arise in the same way. The imagined component is not false because it feels less painful. Sometimes it feels even more painful than the event itself. It is imagined because it is created through interpretation rather than direct experience. This becomes easier to understand when we remember what we've already explored, when physical intelligence reaches its fullness. The mind experiences a natural sense of self. There is no ego. There is nothing to defend. The mind simply experiences itself fully within the present moment. But life does not stand still. The filter begins to fall. As it falls, the natural sense of self gradually begins to diminish. The mind senses that loss and instinctively tries to restore what it once experienced. It constructs a substitute self, the ego, a mental attempt to preserve the identity it believes is slipping away. It clings. It compares. It remembers. It worries. It imagines. The present moment quietly slips away, replaced by stories about what has been or what might yet happen. And this is where imagined suffering begins, not in the present, but in the movement away from it as the filter continues to fall. The stories gradually lose their authority. The self no longer feels quite so solid. And perhaps for the first time, we notice something remarkable. We are not the stories. We are the awareness within which the stories appear. That realization changes everything. It doesn't remove pain. It changes our relationship with it. The body may still hurt. Loss may still arrive. Grief may still move through us. Nothing in this talk asks us to deny that. Pain belongs to life. But suffering becomes very different when the mind no longer mistakes the story for who we are. Real suffering and imagined suffering are different, but they are not separate. Both present exactly the same invitation. Will the mind identify with what is happening, or will it remain present to what is happening? Imagined suffering arises when the mind becomes absorbed in its own stories. Real suffering arises through the body itself, but in both, the deeper question is the same. Will self remain at the center, or will selflessness quietly take its place? The filter continues to fall throughout our lives. The falling filter does not create enlightenment. It simply makes presence more possible. What follows is always a matter of free will. Each moment offers the same choice: to strengthen the self or to allow selflessness to quietly displace it. That is enlightenment. Not becoming someone new, but allowing the observer to stand where self once stood. The body may still feel, the nervous system may still respond. Loss is still loss. Love is still love, but awareness no longer collapses into every experience. It witnesses without becoming what it witnesses. The more self is displaced from the center, the less power, both real and imagined suffering, hold over us. Pain may still arise, emotion may still surge, but neither defines who we are. This is why suffering can become such a profound teacher. Not because suffering is good, but because every moment offers the same invitation: to strengthen the story of ourselves, or to quietly allow that story to loosen. As self moves aside, absolute consciousness expands. Physical intelligence continues its work, but what expands is increasingly ignited by divine intelligence, appearing within life as intuition. Peace deepens, love deepens, well-being deepens, not because life becomes easier, but because the one living through it is no longer the self at the center. At the pinnacle of the real component, standing fully as the observer, what becomes apparent is not the disappearance of the mind, the body, or the human spirit, but the disillusion of identification with them. The witness remains spacious, grounded, untouched, and suffering dissolves at its root. Suffering has two parts. Freedom has one. Seeing clearly what belongs to life and what belongs to the stories the mind continually tells. Because once the stories begin to loosen, only what is real remains. And what is real is always lighter than the story.